Hey everyone, it's Ed Gutowski here. Hey, I hope you are enjoying this hot weekend before 4th of July. Can you believe it that we are halfway through class? So we are in week 3. I've enjoyed everything that I've been reading from you guys. Our discussion of rhetoric and argument has been really interesting. We now know that rhetoric and argument use 3 things, right? We know rhetoric and argument uses logos, pathos, ethos. And as of week 3, I'm still going to maintain my definition of rhetoric, which is words that are used to manipulate, deceive, and con people, even though most of class still likes to use the word persuade. And in week 4, we'll start to get into talking about the ability to persuade. But what I want to do now is to add to our next step to understanding how rhetoric and argument works. So we're now going to talk about something called fallacies. So for this assignment, you're going to need your Everything's an Argument textbook, and you're going to want to look at chapter 5. And chapter 5 is actually titled Fallacies of Argument. And what our textbook does is it lists a variety of different fallacies. So I think it's important that we talk about fallacies, because this is how rhetoric separates itself from an argument. Because rhetoric will always use fallacies, while a strong argument will try to avoid fallacies. So I think it's important that we talk about fallacies. And here's the thing, right? I think sometimes when students hear the word fallacy, they panic. They think, oh my God, fallacies are going to be hard, fallacies are going to be stupid, or fallacies are going to be confusing. But here's the thing, once you learn how fallacies work, they're really sometimes easy to identify. And some of them are really silly, and some of them really dumb, and then some of them really require that you critically think. So what I would do if this was a ground class is I would write the word fallacy on the board, and I'd ask students to kind of define what the term fallacy means. And once again, we can be in a place where some students have never heard the term fallacy, some students are familiar with the term, and then some don't understand what it means at all. But if you look or listen to the word fallacy, right, the first thing that can come to mind is something that's false, right, something that's fake. And so I will define fallacies as false logic. And I think there's a merit to understanding how fallacies work, because let's say you go out there in the real world and you come across someone using a fallacy. And let's say for a minute you accept my definition of rhetoric. And my definition of rhetoric is still words used to manipulate, deceive, and con people. Well, if you come across that person using rhetoric, and then you come across them using a fallacy, saying something that's fake, saying something that's false, what your brain does is it critically thinks, and rhetoric would have less of an impact on you. So I think there's a reason why there's a reason why you kind of want to recognize how fallacies work, because really we see them all the time in the real world. So there are several fallacies in our textbook, and one of my favorite fallacies is the ad hominem. And the ad hominem is when you attack a person's character rather than addressing the issue. Right, and so imagine that there is a student on our online class, and let's imagine that student just hates me. So he goes onto campus and he says, don't take Professor Gutowski's class, he's really boring. Don't take Professor Gutowski, he looks like Saddam Hussein. Don't take Professor Gutowski, he's a real son of a bitch. Well, notice what that student did was he used an ad hominem. He attacked my character rather than addressing an issue, right? Notice he called me Saddam Hussein. He called me a son of a bitch. He didn't address an issue. He said, don't take Professor Gutowski's class. He tries to cram too much in a 6-week online class. Don't take Professor Gutowski's online class. He'll drop you if you don't send a welcome email, right? Then instead what that person did was attacked my character. So I always like the ad hominem. The other fallacy that I always think is interesting is the non sequitur. And what the non sequitur is when you take 2 things that have nothing in common and you try to join them together. Right? You take 2 things that have nothing in common and you try to join them together. So imagine there's another student in our online class who hates our class, and he goes and he says, hey, don't take Professor Gutowski's class, it's just like Auschwitz. Don't take Professor Gutowski's, it's just like Dachau. Don't take Professor Gutowski's class, it's just like being in a concentration camp. Notice what that student did, again, was used a non sequitur, right? He compared 2 things that have nothing in common. He compared our class to a concentration camp. And notice, right, our class is nothing like being in a concentration camp. And the reason why I like these fallacies is that we see these 2 all the time. Notice in politics, we always hear, right, don't vote for Hillary Clinton, right? She's a woman, she's a Democrat, she's a lesbian, I don't know, don't vote for Hillary Clinton. Notice it doesn't deal with an issue. It doesn't deal with like Hillary Clinton wants to expand Obamacare or Hillary Clinton might raise your taxes. Instead, it attacks her character. Always like when George W. Bush was president, they always used to say, don't vote for George W. Bush. He's stupid, he's clumsy, he's from Texas, and he can't say the word nuclear. Right? Again, that attacks his character rather than addressing the issue that Bush might want to lower your taxes or Bush might want to increase military spending, right? So the ad hominem we see all the time. And the non sequitur, right, when we associate two things that have nothing in common, we hear all the time, right? I think, we've always heard that Joe Biden is the next Hitler. And if Biden isn't the next Hitler, then it was definitely Trump was Hitler. If Trump wasn't the next Hitler, Obama was the black Hitler, right? If Obama wasn't the black Hitler, George W. Bush, right? We hear that all the time, right? It's like, it makes you wonder if back in like 1799 people were saying don't vote for Thomas Jefferson. He's short, he's lame, and he's gonna, right, and he's just like Hitler, right? It was like, you makes you wonder, right, if people actually believe this kind of nonsense. But the non sequitur is associating two things that have nothing in common. And then there's the bandwagon, and the bandwagon is really easy. Everyone else is doing it. Why aren't you doing it? Right, so we just wanted to do kind of just a basic review on fallacies. I don't know if this lecture will help, but what you're going to do for a discussion board question is in our textbook, you're going to look over, there's something like 15 fallacies, 15, 18 fallacies. You're going to pick the one you like the best and the one you like the worst. And I'll look forward to seeing what you think about fallacies.